David Spiegel, thanks for being here. I'm going to start us off with something that you've said and then a question from it. So the quote is, people go into dissociative states when they're traumatized. Hypnosis is helping them remember and deal with the memories better because they're more in the mental state that's more like what happened. So this is the Mental Golf Show. So I want to keep it to golf as much as possible, but trauma is an interesting thing here. Obviously, golf, it's a stretch to call anything in golf traumatic, but while we're in the realm of golf, how can golf trauma, or do you think golf trauma can put people into that dissociative state? Does it qualify as that level of trauma, do you think?
Well, it's certainly, the stakes can be very high, and the fear of embarrassment or disappointing people or not achieving goals that you'd set for yourself can be traumatic. I would not put it on the same level as, being sexually assaulted or beaten up or in combat or anything like that.
Of course.
But, there is a kind of a gap between who you think you are, who you want to be, and what reality is letting you be. So the essence of trauma is helplessness. It's being made into an object, a thing. And having problems with a golf game is similar in that you're in a situation where it may happen that what you just did is exactly the opposite of what you expected or wanted to happen. And I think, Rory McIlroy's story of that, blowout in the Masters years ago is like that he was heading in one direction and he wound up being in another direction. So there is a kind of natural dissociation. You look at the person who just went through this and say, this isn't me, or I don't want it to be me. And so it's hard to integrate those two. And what hypnosis can do is induce a kind of artificial sense of dissociation where you can take a look at yourself. You can see what happened, but you can see yourself in a different way. And that's where I think hypnosis can be helpful. It can help you kind of get back to who you think you are while acknowledging what happened. But you don't let it derail you. You acknowledge it, but you see it and say, here's what happened, here's my perspective on it, here's who I think I am, how can I be what I want to be, not what happened. And in that sense, using it for golf and high stakes golf tournaments is not so different from seeing yourself in a traumatic situation and saying, is this all I am? Can I be different? Was this my fault? And how can I, because I think where hypnosis can really help people in golf and other athletic performances is get the stuff out of the way that is keeping you from relating to your body in the way you want. So it's not about the results, it's not about the bumps in the road, it's about how you and your body can work together to do what you want to do. And you just don't want these other things to distract you. So hypnosis can help you see that there is a disjunction between what you want to be and what happened that time, but you want to get back to, how do I relate to my body in a way that we both get what we want?
Right. So a quote-unquote traumatic event, whether it's actual real trauma or a situation that you've experienced in the past that was counter to what you wanted to do in a very jarring way. Yes. Either one of those can kind of put a rift in how you see yourself. You were seeing yourself as, I'm a good player. I perform well under pressure. And then all of a sudden this, you speak of Rory McIlroy, 2011 Masters, I don't know. I forget what he did on hole 10, but he tripled it, played a terrible back nine, lost the Masters. And
right.
Is what that event that happened to him, or that event that he was part of, is that what it did to him? It changed how he saw himself. Is that a fair way to say it?
Well, I know from what I read and hear. I don't know.
Of course.
The contact.
Of course.
Yes, I think I think the ball wound up in a tree somewhere, and he had to
Yeah.
go hunting for it. And that's an embarrassing, unexpected thing. And the problem is that that has such an imprint that it tends to hijack your attention in the future. And you say, which one of these golfers am I? Because they don't they don't go together. And so it's a matter of finding a way to reconnect with your body and who you want to be and process what happened in a way that it doesn't hijack your attention, that you acknowledge it, but it doesn't take over, and you focus on what you're for, not what you're against. It's like
Mm.
people who use hypnosis like to say that the worst thing you can tell someone is don't think about purple elephants. That's what you'll think about. Don't think about making a mess of this hole and winding up in a water hazard or in a tree somewhere. Because the more you tell yourself not to think about it, the more you're inclined to do it. And so this is a way of acknowledging it, that there are different parts of you, that we all make mistakes, but how can you reconnect even better with your body to do what it is you intend to do?
Right. So it is important for everyone out there who experiences these kind of jarring events. You hit one really terrible golf shot in front of your three playing partners or something, right? The relative levels of lowercase t golf trauma are all up and down the board, from the highest level to the beginner golfer, right? We all experience those kind of really traumatic events in golf terms. But uh, it is it important for every single one of us to look and address and relive and recreate these things in our mind and pay attention to them and process them? Is that always important? Is that always a good thing to do?
Well, I'd put it this way. I think where techniques like hypnosis can help is to get you to focus on what will, in fact, make you a better player and a better golfer. And one of the things that will disrupt that is if you're always thinking about how you blew it sometime.
Right.
But the real issue, there's a book called Zen and the Art of Archery, and this anthropologist was looking at how Zen archers work. They were very good archers. And he says that the worst mistake you can make is to focus on the target. He said, because what really matters is your relationship with the bow and arrow, how your body is. And I mean, that's what will control what happens. And if you're focusing too much on the goal, you're not focusing enough on how you relate to your muscles and your attention and the things you need to do to make it work right. And I think a lot of times people in competitive golf and other competitive sports focus too much on the ultimate outcome and not enough on what you need to do to get there. I was asked to help the Stanford women's swimming team. They're a terrific team, and they've got a lot of Olympic swimmers in them. But the coach noticed that they were swimming better in practice than they were in meets. Their times were faster. And, we all think, oh, you get that pump of adrenaline, you're really going for it. And that's not what was happening. They were getting distracted by focusing on the women in the neighboring lanes. And, like golf, swimming is not a contact sport. It really doesn't matter what the other people are doing. It matters what you do. So I had them go into self-hypnosis and practice swimming their best race and rehearse it in their mind. And that's like what Tiger does before he takes a shot. Every time he rehearses the swing. And so he's focusing not on, am I going to win this thing or not? He's focusing on how do I relate to my body and the club and the ball in the best possible way. And clear all that other stuff out of your head. And in the Stanford women's swimming team started swimming faster in meets because they learned to focus on what mattered, which is their relationship to their body and how they use their body to swim most effectively. And I'd say that principle is it with golf too. There are a lot of distractions beside, there are nasty comments from someone you're playing with. There's some idiot in the crowd yelling. There are all kinds of things that could distract you, and that will interfere with your game. And what you want to do is just stay on it being how you have learned and taught your body to work to play as well as you can.
Yeah, and this is fascinating. You've laid out this whole uh, concept without ever using the word process. The what you're describing is your routine or your process, or process versus outcome, right? Instead of focusing on the end result of the shot, you focus on, okay, what are the things I can control, and where hypnosis comes in is me getting in my own way of doing my process well, and hypnosis can help that. Am I getting that right?
That's yes, you are. What hypnosis is a state of highly focused attention. It's like looking through a telephoto lens in a camera. What you see with great detail, but you're less aware of the context. So, intensity of focus. And we've learned from using functional magnetic resonance imaging that what's happening in the brain is you're turning down activity in a part of the brain that we call the salience network. It's the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, back right in the middle, and it's like a C inverted in the center of your head. And it's the alarm system in the brain. So you hear a loud noise, you turn away and see what it is. That's that system going off. And you turn it down. You just turn down activity there. You inhibit it with the same neurotransmitters that anti-anxiety drugs use, only we can dispense them in our own brain. And so part of it is you're in a state of mind where you're less likely to be distracted. You're focusing intently. The second thing is you're increasing the brain's connectivity between the prefrontal cortex, the executive control region, which hopefully I'm using now talking to you, and the insula, which is a little island of tissue in the middle of the front part of the brain that is a mind-body relay. So you're intensifying your ability to control your body and to perceive how your body's reacting. And the third part is you inhibit activity when you're thinking and planning and playing. In the posterior cingulate cortex, it's called what we call the default mode network. It's a part of the brain where you reflect on who you are, what people think of you, what your mother wanted you to be, and all that. I call it the my fault mode network. And if you're busy thinking, oh my God, I just embarrassed myself, or I'm going to make a fool of myself, or everybody will be disappointed in me, that's the part of the brain that's doing it. And in hypnosis, you can just shut that one down as you focus on what you're doing. So the more you can allow yourself to immerse in this process, the less likely you are to be inhibited by memories of bad things in the past or fears about what might happen to your reputation or whatever it is. So it's a way of using your brain that allows you to intensify your attention to what's important, which is how you're relating to your body, how your body's working, how you're doing what you want it to do, and let the other stuff take care of itself later.
That's fascinating. So you mentioned self-hypnosis.
Right.
So obviously not everyone can talk directly to Dr. Spiegel. I'm getting the great honor to get to talk to him right now. But for all of those who can't and maybe aren't able to directly interact with a hypnotist, hypnotherapist, whatever it is, what is self-hypnosis? What is it like? What is a technique we can do? Is it something that everyone can do on their own, completely on their own?
Well, all hypnosis is really self-hypnosis, Josh. There's no magic to it. It's just a state of mind that most of us, not all of us, but most of us can enter. Now, I would say people can actually get to be hypnotized with help from me. We built an app called Reveri, which is a digital interactive self-hypnosis app. It's available, in the App Store, Google Play. First week's free. You can just try it out and see what it's like for you. And you get to hear my voice. And periodically, I'll ask you a question. Is your hand floating in the air? Are you feeling different? If they say yes, I go on to something else. If not, they get a different instruction. And we're using AI more and more to make it interactive, like what happens in my office.
Oh, interesting.
And so that's available to anyone who wants to use it. Reveri. Reveri.com is the web address. And I want it to be available because, in fact, if you have hypnotic ability, you don't have to have a hypnotist, but you do need to learn what the practice is like and how to get yourself into that state. It takes seconds, not minutes or hours, to get into a hypnotic state if you're hypnotizable. And at least 2/3 of the adult population is at least somewhat, and some are very hypnotizable. So it's certainly worth a try. You used to think of watching dangling watches, but that doesn't work well with digital watches, so I don't use that anymore. You can just shift gears, turn inward, imagine your body floating in a bath, a lake, a hot tub, or floating in space, and shift into this state of self-hypnosis. And so it's an underutilized resource that most people have available to them.
I like how you basically, I was framing it in a way of that it's something that we have to, it's a new thing that we have to discover that we can then use. But you're describing it as something that we already possess. We just maybe don't use it or don't access it, or we do, maybe we just don't realize we're doing it. Like flow state, or I've heard you mention when you're watching a movie and you get really engaged with the movie, you don't even realize you become the movie, not the audience, or something like that.
Exactly.
I thought that was a really great way to put it. Is that, am I along the right lines of hip?
No, you're absolutely right. It's believed in imagination. You're just in. So when you get so caught up in a good movie, you forget you're watching a movie.
Right.
You become part of the movie instead of part of the audience. You're in a self-hypnotic state, and a lot of people can do that, and they can do it very quickly and easily. And it's a way of allowing yourself to focus on what you want to focus on and putting distractions and other things outside of awareness. I think of it like an app that you've downloaded to your phone but you don't use. It's there. You could use it if you wanted to, but you're not using it. And so for most people, they have this ability, and they may spontaneously do it sometimes, And there are some athletes, I think, who get into states like this, or you mentioned flow states or like that. They're self-reinforcing. Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the book Flow, says that you do it even if nobody paid you to do it. You do it just because it feels good doing it. You like doing it. He calls it autotelic. It makes you feel good just to do it. And many people in hypnotic states feel that way. They're surprised at how quickly and easily they can get into a state where they just feel different. They feel better. And I have patients who right away feel less pain, less anxiety. Stress, is a big problem with athletic performance. And a lot of stress is feedback between the mind and the body. So you get anxious, what happens? You tense up. Now, the minute your muscles are tensing up for a reason other than swinging the club, you're interfering with what your body can do best. And so what you want to do first, even if you may have reason to be anxious. I'm not saying anxiety is all a bad thing, but if you let it then tense up your body, and then you notice your body's getting tense and you get more anxious, it's like a snowball rolling downhill. And what you can do with hypnosis is get your body floating and comfortable. Imagine you're in a bath, a lake, a hot tub, or floating in space, and allow your body to relax, and then you can face the problem and handle it better because you don't have that static interference. What hypnosis helps you to do is kind of clear the playing field and let your body be open and relaxed and ready to act, even if you're under a high pressure situation.
Yeah. Okay. So with flow state, and I don't know if it was Csikszentmihalyi or studies done since him, and maybe I'm misremembering this completely, but there was something with high performance athletes enter into flow state or are in flow state 10% of the time or something. I don't know why that number is in my mind, but is that synonymous with being in a hypnotic state? Is being in a hypnotic state something you would want to do in a performance, or is it more of a let's do this off course, which will help you on course?
Well, I think it's both. I think the practical way to do it is like the way Tiger does it. Before each swing, he just closes his eyes and rehearses how his body's going to act. But I think good actors are in that state. The method in acting. The method is not think about the lines and what the people. It's you become that person.
Right.
And good actors are often very hypnotizable, and you say to them, wow, you were terrific. And they look at you puzzled. They say, I didn't do anything. I was just, sort of channeling that person. That's who I became. And so I think the best athletes, and one of the things you notice about really great athletes is how natural they are. You know, they're not putting something on. They're just being this. They love it. They're doing it, you know. Willie Mays catching fly balls backwards and stuff like that. Just, you know, he didn't plan to do that. He just was in the flow of what was going on, and he did it. So it's an ability that we have that we underestimate in terms of how helpful it can be to just be in that state where you're totally into what you're doing
Yeah.
and you're not worrying about anything else.
Yeah. So is hypnosis a way to shortcut, and that's probably not a fair term, but I'm being devil's advocate or whatever. Is hypnosis a way to shortcut practice, or actually developing a skill at a craft? Is it a way to I want to be able to hit a high draw with my irons, so I'm going to envision myself from a hypnotic state, from a suggestible state, that I'm able to do it, that I am that person. Is that real?
Yeah, you can do it. I wouldn't say, you know, you can just sort of, you know, practice, literally physically practice, you know, half as often and do fine.
Right.
You know, you need to train your brain and your body to work
Sure.
together to do what they have to do. But I'll give you an example of that. The Sochi Olympics, you know, about 10 years ago, there was very little snow, and one of the least disgusting things that Putin did was insist that it had to be at Sochi, even though they had very little snow. And so they could only do one practice run before they actually had to compete, which is not a good thing. So Bode Miller and the other skiers went up to the top of the run, looked up, closed their eyes, and just practiced every move in the run all the way down. And our team did extremely well, you know, because so you know, it's there. It had to be a substitute for the actual physical
Yeah.
practice. And it can help. A lot of the game is mental.
Yeah.
And if you're training your brain to help collaborate with your body and do what it needs to do, and if you can do that mental practice as well as the physical practice, it can really help.
Yeah, so it strikes me as hypnosis is more skill access versus skill acquisition, right? You're putting yourself into a place where you can access the skill that you have practiced, as opposed to this is how you acquire skill, maybe.
Well, I think it can be both, actually.
Okay.
I don't want to. I'm not saying it's a replacement for
Sure.
doing the things that any good athlete has to do, but I think it is a good way of learning strategies that can help you do things better. So,
Yeah.
you know, we teach people because we make a lot of assumptions about how our brain and body interact, many of which are wrong. And so one example is, you know, you've got an injury, and athletes deal with that all the time. You're going to have this much pain. You know, you've dislocated your shoulder, or you've broken something or something. And in fact, the amount of pain you feel is in part due to tissue injury. It's in part due to how your brain processes the signal. And so, you know, we've seen athletes, you know, you see a basketball player who gets knocked down and you think he's out for the season, and he gets up and shakes it off. Well, sometimes that's not a good thing to do, but sometimes it
Sure.
is, because he's saying, I see this as a bump in the road and I'm playing my game. On the other hand, if you're fearful or afraid, you can say this pain is horrible, and the strain and pain lies mainly in the brain. We've got, on Reveri, we've got a bunch of exercises that help people literally change how much pain they feel. So this idea that,
Wow.
if you're injured, you've got X amount of pain is just wrong. And, you know, pain can be a useful signal. Don't walk on that broken ankle. But there are football players who are playing on broken ankles, and the coach looks at their ankle and says, it's swollen, what happened? And they're so invested in the game. Now, I don't recommend that as a general
Sure.
strategy, but what I'm saying is you can literally learn techniques that help you modulate not just what you tell your muscles to do, but the signals you get from your body about how it's feeling. And, you know, we
Yeah.
all know, you know, athletes, you know that a certain amount of pain is part of becoming an athlete. Even if you're not getting injured, muscles get sore when you use them a lot, and that's actually their signal to grow. That's how, you know, there's actually evidence now that using anti-inflammatories after you work out interferes with your muscles growing. That the way the muscles build is they have little minor injuries that they then, and they grow bigger in repairing those little minor injuries. And so that goes with the territory. So it's important to recognize that you can use your brain better to train your body and react to your body in ways that are better for your performance.
Yeah. That's such an interesting thing of just shifting your perspective of how you see something, right? Two golfers can experience the same thing, and one, whatever, it's no big deal, and the other is traumatic. This was awful. This is going to shape the way I view myself for the rest of my life. So
Right. Exactly.
that is, let's see, hypnosis allows someone to be in a state where they can the suggestible state, the hypnotizable state, where you can better shift your perspective to, this is not who I want to be, or this is not who I actually am. That was just one event. I've had a guest on who was he calls himself a golf hypnotherapist, and I don't know, calls himself. That's not fair. He is a golf hypnotherapist. Sorry, Paul. He talks about. I told him about a situation in my past where I was in contention to win a golf tournament. It's the 16th hole or something, and I hit a snap hook left into the trees. I chopped that one out and made a double and lost the golf tournament. And to me, ever since that point, I'm scared of a left miss. I hold on to the club when I'm in contention. I feel this this heightened anxiety to don't hit that same shot again. And the way Paul was talking to me about it was, that's one way to look at it, as that snap hook tee shot meant or led to you is why you lost the golf tournament. That's one way to look at it. You could just as easily look at it as, that was a golf shot, and then another guy won the tournament. And the two don't necessarily have to be directly related. In my mind, as I look back, they are, right? That happened, therefore that happened. So he was saying being able to look at it, just look at the same event in a different way is how we can kind of repair our past image of ourselves. Is that a purpose of hypnosis?
Sure, I think it's the context in which you see things like that, and
Yeah.
I would say if you can, at some other time, not when you're playing, but and use a state like self-hypnosis to kind of relive events that led up to that experience, and say, well, there's something to learn. My body taught me a lesson that whatever I did was not the best thing I could do,
Right.
and I wonder how that happened. Was I distracted? Was I excessively worried about what was going to happen or what that guy was going to do? And often Rory McIlroy in his Masters problem game he was well ahead actually, and he was like 3 shots ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And did he get distracted? See if you can learn from that and say, was I losing touch with my body? Was I taking it for granted? Was I not on it in terms of what I needed to do? And let me learn from that and not let myself get in a situation like that again. But rather than seeing it as some fundamental flaw or defect, just see it as obviously a mistake of some kind. What can I learn from it, and how can my body and I work together better so that it doesn't happen again? And
Yeah.
that's fine. But it's a matter of being able to face the situation, not be so upset that you can't think about it, but see if you can learn from it, and that's, all of us do that. We make mistakes, we learn from them, and we try to use that knowledge to get better. And rather than seeing it, as you're pointing out, as some fundamental flaw in you that's going to prevent you from ever doing what you want to do, but see it for what it is. You can't ignore it. It happened. It changed the course of that tournament. But what can you learn? It's not the sort of final bottom line conclusion about who you are, as Rory McIlroy finally discovered. But it was a bump in the road, and he needed to learn from it.
Yeah, and you've mentioned Rory a few times. I was reading an article. He cites Reveri specifically
Yes,
as something he has used to help him.
yes.
I don't know if it's specifically get over that Masters, maybe, but because
I
that
don't
was
know.
a
I think he
yeah
did. He did it after that Masters situation. I don't know how long after,
right.
but yes, I think he was worried that he was kind of, permanently damaged by having that experience. And when he's in another Masters tournament, obviously he's going to think about it.
Mm,
And so the issue is, the more you think about, don't think about purple elephants. Don't
mhm.
think about that terrible shot. That's what you're thinking about. So what you want to do is be able to reconstruct that experience into something that is a lesson that you can learn from and do better the next time.
Yeah, and that 10th hole where he hit the snap hook and made triple and kind of ultimately led to the collapse back in 2011. I remember this year on the final day, hole 10, I'm thinking there's no way he's not thinking about that, right? He's 3, 4 shots up. Very similar situation to 14 years ago.
Right.
I'm thinking there's no way that's not flittering through his mind. Do you think, and spoiler, he striped it down the middle of the fairway. It was perfect, perfect shot. Do you think that in that moment, is it a reasonable expectation for us to are we trying to get to a place where that thought never even occurs, or we handle it better when it does occur?
Yeah, I'd say it's more like that. If you're
Yeah,
if you're you're too brittle if you're thinking, because then what if it does occur? I don't want it
yeah,
to occur, but what if it does?
very fragile.
So I would say it's better to say, been there, done that. I've learned something from it. I'm going to think about it and move on. I'm just
Hmm.
not going to let it, because if you think, oh my God, if I think about it, you're making yourself very vulnerable, because you might think about it. Why wouldn't you? But you say, okay, I got this, and my body and I have learned a lesson, and we're going to handle the same situation differently.
Hmm.
And so you've got a plan to deal with it. And that's a way of not being too vulnerable to the possibility, the likelihood that you are going to think about it. So the trick is to think about it differently. And that's where, we started out talking about golf and trauma, and golf is not fundamentally traumatic. But
Sure.
look, people who have been in car accidents, who have been beaten up, who have been sexually assaulted, are going to be in situations that will inevitably remind them of that. And what I try to help them do is restructure their experience of it, to recognize in an assault, for example, what did you do to protect yourself? Um, you know, and I've had
Hmm.
sexual assault victims say, on the one hand, this guy is surprised that I'm fighting him that hard. And on the other hand, I think he doesn't just want to rape me, he wants to kill me.
Hmm.
And so on the one hand, you might say, thanks, Doc, it was even worse than I thought it was. It's so kind of you. But on the other hand, she thought about situations like that, saying, you know what, I did defend myself. I need to defend myself. I maybe saved my life. And so, the emotional valence of that is very different. It's still a terrible,
Yes.
terrifying thing, but you can also appreciate what you did. And in the same way, if you can work through having a really bad shot in a very tense situation, you can say, okay, been there, done that. I wasn't great, but I know now how to do it better. So you're stronger for that, you're not vulnerable. So I think that's the way to approach it, is how do my body and I get along better to handle this better?
Yeah, and not just because it was and this is the whole thing, just because it was a bad shot, a bad hole, a bad score, a lost tournament, does not mean that it was wall to wall terrible, right? Just like the sexual assault victim who actually looks back and realizes, I actually am more capable than I realized I was. I thought I was totally uh, taken over in the situation. I actually showed up and was more strong and that empowers me now going forward. So for a golfer to, I, it's, I'm ashamed that we're even comparing the two, but But as trivial as it could be, we look back at a situation, a golf traumatic event like that, and say, okay, it was bad, sure, or I didn't like the outcome. It was uncomfortable, but it wasn't wall to wall terrible. What did I do well? What,
Right.
in what ways did I show that I was actually very capable? There was just a few moments where I wasn't capable enough.
Right. How did I get to the point where I was 3 holes ahead of everybody
Yeah.
else in the field, And, the sort of simple thing is, well, you blew it, fella, But in fact, you got there. There aren't many golfers in the world that can get there. You did. And so how can you use those skills again and do it even better? That's it. But you're right. It's the same situation seen from a different point of view. And that's, again, where dissociation helps. It's kind of, you can sort of step back and take a look at yourself and say, well, here's the good news, here's the bad news. How can I make it better? That kind of thing.
Looking at it very neutrally instead of being caught up in the emotions of it. Yeah. So let's take a kind of a left turn to something more practical in golf. Are you familiar with the term the yips?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So and that it's a term that applies to different sports, maybe all sports, but in golf it's a very prevalent thing where someone has maybe a relatively easy shot and they get completely in their own way, have some sort of physical twitching sensation, and can't make a smooth motion at the golf ball. So for those folks that struggle with it, I interact with people like that on a daily basis. Are the feeling that I get from them is that they are afflicted with this disease, that it happened to me and now I can never get rid of it, and it's permanent, and it's this thing that I'm just going to have to learn to live with.
Yeah.
Is that does that have to be true? And if not, how can we resolve something like the yips?
No, it doesn't have to be true. And what it is that feedback between mind and body in the wrong direction. So you think, oh my God, is it going to happen again? Or you feel your hand shake just a bit, and you think, oh God, here it is. And the more you do that, the more scared you are of it happening, the more likely it is to happen, because brain and body interact with one another. So you get more anxious, you start using neurotransmitters that trigger arousal, your body reacts to it, your muscles get tense, and then you notice that and you think, yep, it's happening again, oh my God, And so it's this sort of feed forward cycle that doesn't stop itself. And the thing about hypnosis is you say, okay, you're worried about this, but you can control your body better than you think you can. And so instead of sweating it out as you're about to take a shot, spend some time when you're going to prepare to play to imagine first that you're somewhere where your body feels really safe and comfortable. You're taking a warm bath, you're in a hot tub, you're skiing, whatever it is that makes you feel relaxed and comfortable. And just picture that and notice how you can reduce the level of tension in your body. And if you want to, before you shoot around or before you step up to swing, just do that again. Sit down, look up, close your eyes, and picture yourself somewhere where your body feels comfortable. And so you're saying, yeah, understandably, I'd be a little anxious about this, but I can make my body feel comfortable. That's my present to my body, and my body's present to me is that it gets more comfortable. So, if you tell yourself don't have it, it's going to happen. But if you say, there is this mind-body connection, I'm going to use it to help my body feel relaxed and comfortable, and then step up, and then I'll, picture my swing the way Tiger does and how I'm going to do it. And that's the way to go about it. And that's where self-hypnosis can be very helpful.
Yeah, that is, I like that. I'm gonna visualize myself, put myself into a relaxing place, and not just as a way to mask any fears or pretend that it's not going to happen. It's as a kind of evidence to yourself. You're showing yourself what you're capable of doing to your body. You're able to use your body you use your mind to relax the tension in your body, which tells you I don't have to be taken over by something, right? I have power over this connection.
That's exactly right. And what you do is you get things settled with your body first, get it floating and comfortable, and then you can picture in an imaginary screen how you're going to take that next shot, what you're going to do, and just go out there and do it. Just the way Bode Miller did that ski run, you just get up there and think it through. So, but you start out with the obvious thing of getting your body as comfortable as possible, and then you picture how you're going to use it. And you're taking charge, and you're working together with your body, not against it. Because the trouble with that whole thinking about the yips is your body becomes the enemy. Instead of feeling your connection with the club and the ball and all that stuff, you're watching your body to see whether it's starting to shake and all this stuff. And that's just an invitation for it to happen. And it's creating an oppositional relationship. Your body becomes the problem, not the solution. And you want it to be the solution.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. A lot of the players that I talk to talk about, you know, um, in life, in my work, in these other sports, I don't encounter these same things that I encounter in golf. There's something about golf that brings this out of me more than anything else in my life. It makes me more anxious. It makes me more afraid. I'm much more tense. Nothing makes me more tense than first tee on a golf course or whatever it is. So, if you could speculate, uh, why do you why do you think those players, or maybe it's something about golf specifically? I don't know. If you could speculate, why do you think that does happen to those people?
Well, I think, part of it is it's a very public display of what you can do.
Hmm.
And the results are obvious. And you play with friends or you play with people. If it's professionally with, there are people observing you and trying to judge you, and so your performance is on display in a way that is often less the case, and certainly less immediately the case in the work we do. Sooner or later, do you get promoted or not? People will notice, but in golf, every move you make is visible and has consequences.
Hmm.
And I think that's why people like it, but it's also why it makes some nervous, is that you're all too easily evaluated in real time.
Hmm.
And that can make people nervous. I understand that. But again, that's all the more reason to say, yeah, these other people are there, but what matters here is how I'm relating to my body, how I'm concentrating on what I'm going to do. And I'll worry about what they think about it later on.
Hmm.
For me, this is between me and my body. That's what matters.
Hmm.
Focus on that.
Yeah, it's empowering. I love that. So, to stay practical on breathing exercises, on things you can do while you're on the golf course, what's a just a breathing protocol that someone can do as they're playing golf in different situations, or just all the time, or what do you say about that?
Well, just to help golfers on Reveri, we also have two breathing exercises
Oh,
as
nice.
well. And the one that is the most portable and I think most usable at times of tension is what we call cyclic sighing. And when you sigh, if you just let out your breath, it conveys acceptance. And in fact, people say, well, if you want to relax, take a deep breath. Well, actually, that's the wrong thing to do, because when you inhale, you do it by reducing pressure inside your lungs, and it sucks in air from outside. You're also reducing, just by a little bit, venous blood return to the heart. And so the heart senses that and starts pumping faster and harder. You get a sympathetic arousal to make sure you maintain the flow of blood in the body. But when you exhale, it's the opposite. You're increasing pressure in the heart. You're increasing venous return to the blood. And that triggers what we call parasympathetic response, a relaxation response. And you increase what's called heart rate variability, which is a sign of parasympathetic activity. It's a state you've got to get into to go to sleep, for example. So what you can do is inhale through your nose, Maybe stop for a second and then fill your lungs completely. And you can try this if you want, see what it feels like. Inhale through your nose, hold, fill your lungs, and then slowly exhale through your mouth. Now
Feels
again,
very good.
inhale through your nose, starting with your belly. Hold. Fill your lungs completely. Slow exhale through your mouth. How does that feel?
I feel extremely relaxed.
Yeah, you feel relaxed? You feel a
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah, I do. That's easy.
Yeah, yeah. Any particular part of your body, or you just feel relaxed in general?
You mentioned heart. It does. In these kind of interviews and throughout my day, I feel like maybe a tension in my chest, just like I'm always um, go go go.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I feel more relaxed there.
Good.
Feels
That's great.
it feels more like I'm deeper into my chair.
Yeah, deeper into my chair. I love that. That's really good. So that's what you can do in a hurry, as you see. It doesn't take long.
No.
But it's a way of breathing that produces relaxation. And we've done randomized controlled studies showing that that kind of breathing will slow your average respiratory rate, which is a sign that you're turning down sympathetic activity, and improve your mood. You feel better. And you can do that anywhere, standing, sitting, wherever you're going, and it can help you in a hurry induce a state of physical relaxation. That's another thing to try if you feel like you're getting the yips while you're on the course, is just breathe like that and see if it doesn't reduce that sense of physical tension.
Mm. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I understand that you know about golf, but you don't play golf specifically yourself. Is that right?
No, no, I
Okay.
do other sports, but I'm not a golfer.
You'd be amazing. You'd be an amazing golfer.
Thank you.
But this, I think this serves as a really good episode to say golf is when we're working on our minds like this, we're not working on our golf game specifically. We're working on ourselves, and golf is one of the things that we do. It's one of the outlets of our minds. So if we can get that relationship better, right, mind body relationship better,
Right.
it helps golf.
Exactly. That's well put. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. It's part of a bigger project, which is how do we get along with our bodies and manage them better. And that's right.
Mm. Awesome. Okay, well you've mentioned Reveri app. Is there anything else that you would mention or send people?
Well, I would, certainly there are excellent clinicians who do hypnosis. There's a Society for Clinical and Experimental Hypnosis, SCEH. You can look it up and get referrals. In general, if you're going for treatment, see somebody who's a licensed and trained professional in some area, psychiatry, psychology, or something else, and who also knows about hypnosis, and there are people around. But the nice thing is you could start with Reveri and see how it feels and what it's like. You can take a hypnotizability test. People differ in their ability to experience hypnosis. We can measure it in about 5 minutes, and you'll get feedback about that. We have a new program where we help you plan your golf game thinking about hypnosis and making recommendations depending on your degree of hypnotizability.
Hmm.
We have programs for getting to sleep, getting back to sleep, and so it's an easy place to start, get a taste of it, and it may be enough, or maybe you want to then go on to a professional who can help you with it. But it's an underutilized and very rapidly effective way of helping yourself get along better with your body.
Mm. That's awesome. Dr. David Spiegel, I appreciate you joining the Mental Golf Show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Josh.